Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman is a groundbreaking exploration of human thought processes. The book delves into the two systems of thinking that govern decision-making and judgment. Chapter 1. System 1. Fast thinking. Automatic, intuitive, and often emotional. 2. System 2. Slow thinking. Deliberative, logical, and effortful. Through extensive research and examples, Kahneman explains how these systems interact, how they influence our choices, and the biases that result. The book provides insights into cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, and the human tendency toward irrationality. Part 1. Two Systems, Chapter 1. The characters of the story. Kahneman introduces System 1 and System 2. System 1 is quick and automatic. It helps us respond to immediate situations, but is prone to biases. System 2 is slower and analytical, but requires effort and attention. For example, recognizing a familiar face is System 1 at work, while solving a complex math problem requires System 2. Chapter 2. Attention and efforts. System 2 is lazy and avoids mental effort unless absolutely necessary. This can lead to reliance on System 1, even in situations requiring careful thought. Kahneman highlights cognitive strain and how multitasking affects our ability to focus and think critically. Chapter 3. The Lazy Controller. When System 2 is not fully engaged, we make errors by defaulting to intuitive responses from System 1. Kahneman explains the concept of cognitive ease, where familiarity feels right, leading to overconfidence and errors. Chapter 4. The Associative Machine. System 1 uses associations to make sense of the world. It links ideas, memories, and emotions, often leading to quick but flawed judgments. This mechanism explains why we sometimes feel something is true, even without evidence. Chapter 5. Cognitive Ease. The ease with which information is processed affects our judgment. Familiarity, simplicity, and repeated exposure make ideas seem more truthful, even if they're not. This has implications for marketing, politics, and misinformation. Part 2. Heuristics and Biases. Chapter 6. Norms, Surprises, and Causes. System 1 expects coherence and patterns, leading us to see cause and effect relationships where none exist. This tendency explains why we often misjudge probabilities or overestimate causation in random events. Chapter 7. A Machine for Jumping to Conclusions. System 1 makes snap judgments based on limited information. These judgments can be useful in emergencies, but often lead to errors when more data is needed. Chapter 8. How Judgments Happen. Kahneman introduces the concept of substitution, where we answer an easier question than the one actually posed. For example, instead of evaluating someone's competence, we might substitute it with a judgment of their confidence. Chapter 9. Answering an easier question. System 1 simplifies complex problems by answering related but simpler questions, often without us realizing. This leads to biased and irrational decisions. Chapter 10. The Law of Small Numbers. Humans are bad at understanding statistics, especially with small sample sizes. We often draw strong conclusions from limited data, leading to the law of small numbers, which is the tendency to see patterns in randomness. Chapter 11. Anchors. The anchoring effect describes how initial information influences subsequent judgments. For example, in negotiations, the first offer often sets the tone for the final agreement. Part 3. Overconfidence. Chapter 12. The Science of Availability. The availability heuristic explains how we judge the probability of events based on how easily examples come to mind. For instance, vivid news stories make rare events, like plane crashes, seem more common than they are. Chapter 13. Availability, Emotion, and Risk. Our emotions heavily influence how we perceive risk. System 1 tends to overestimate risks associated with vivid or emotional events while underestimating mundane but real dangers. Chapter 14. Tom W.'s Specialty. Kahneman discusses the fallacy of representativeness, where people ignore base rates and focus on stereotypes. For example, if Tom seems like an engineer, we might assume he is one, even if the statistics don't support it. Chapter 15. Linda, Less is more. The conjunction fallacy occurs when people think that specific conditions are more probable than general ones. For example, people might believe Linda is a feminist bank teller is more likely than Linda is a bank teller. Chapter 16. Causes trump statistics. We prefer stories and causal explanations over statistical facts. This preference leads to errors in judgment, such as believing anecdotes over data. Chapter 17. Regression to the mean. Kahneman explains regression to the mean, the tendency for extreme outcomes to return to average over time. This principle is often ignored, leading to mistaken causal attributions. Chapter 18. Taming intuitive predictions. System 1 generates quick predictions based on limited information. These intuitive predictions often need adjustment by System 2 to account for regression and base rates. Part 4. Choices. Chapter 19. Prospect theory. Kahneman's Nobel-winning prospect theory explains how people evaluate potential losses and gains. Key concepts include loss aversion, losses hurt, more than equivalent gains feel good. Reference points. Decisions are influenced by how outcomes are framed relative to a reference point. Chapter 20. The endowment effect. We value things we own more than things we don't, even if objectively identical. This explains irrational behaviors in trading and pricing. Chapter 21. Bad events. Negative events and losses weigh more heavily in our minds than positive ones. This asymmetry affects risk-taking, investments, and decision-making. Chapter 22. Rare events. People overestimate the likelihood of rare but dramatic events, like winning the lottery or experiencing a terrorist attack. This skewed perception affects how we assess risk. Chapter 23. The certainty effect. We overvalue certainty even when it leads to irrational decisions. For instance, people prefer a guaranteed 50 over a 50% chance to win 110, even though the latter has a higher expected value. Chapter 24. Risk policies. Kahneman suggests creating policies to guide decisions, as they reduce reliance on emotional, System 1-driven choices. Chapter 25. Keeping score. We mentally track gains and losses, often leading to irrational decisions, such as refusing to sell a losing stock to avoid realizing the loss. Part 5. Two selves. Chapter 26. Life as a story. Kahneman distinguishes between the experiencing self, who lives through events, and the remembering self, who recalls them. The remembering self heavily influences our decisions, often distorting reality. Chapter 27. Experienced well-being. Our happiness depends more on the quality of our experiences than their duration. Kahneman explains the peak-end rule, where we judge experiences by their peak moments and how they end. Chapter 28. Thinking about life. The final chapter explores how we think about life satisfaction and happiness. Kahneman highlights the role of memory and storytelling in shaping our perceptions of a fulfilling life. Conclusion. Thinking Fast and Slow challenges us to recognize and mitigate our cognitive biases. By understanding the interplay between System 1 and System 2, we can make better decisions, improve our judgment, and lead more rational lives. Kahneman's insights are invaluable for anyone seeking to understand the human mind and its quirks. Thanks for joining me today. If you found this summary helpful and want to dive deeper into more transformative books, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Join our community of lifelong learners and stay updated on our latest book summaries and insights. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. What principle from this book resonated with you the most? I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep reading and keep growing.